There we go. So should we start, Mike?
Oh yeah, yeah.
I'll stop.
Look at
sharing
all the
that slide
people
now.
got nice and nervous now. Look at that, loads of people in.
They're joining. I've turned the lobby off, so there won't be lots of pings, and people will just join as they can. So, hi everyone. You're very welcome. Just in case you don't know, my name is Rebecca, and I'm the program coordinator for internships work. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. I'm really pleased to be here with Mike Richardson, who's one of our colleagues at NDTI, who works on the community-led support team. And he does a lot with data, but a lot of other stuff as well. We had quite a lot of feedback from your regional leads about data challenges. I know you were asked to kind of report on data in lots of different ways, but really it's about finding really good ways to use it and to use it to increase supported internships. So Mike's come up with this session, which is called Measuring What Matters. I think we're gonna have a break about halfway through, a short break, so you'll be able to sort of have a breather and make another cup of tea or whatever. But if at any point you need to sort of leave, just turn your camera and mic off and do what you need to do to look after yourself. All the resources and the recording, I'll share them. I'll probably next week, because we've got 5 events going on this week. I'll send all that out to everybody next week at some point, so look out for that. But yeah, I'll pass over to Mike.
Thank you very much, Rebecca, and good morning, everybody. It's really lovely to have been invited to talk to you this morning, and thank you very much for giving up your time. There's an awful lot more of you than I thought there was going to be, so hey, we'll see where this takes us. I'll introduce myself before I start throwing slides and talking to you. As Rebecca said, I work for NDTI with a kind of particular focus on the community-led support program. I'm the development and impact lead for that program. However, obviously, my history has been measurement, improvement, and transformation across local government. So since, oh goodness me, now over 20 years, I've been working in children's and adult social care, and at a national level within the Youth Justice Board to devise the measures and performance framework, improvement frameworks, and transformation. And the key element of that, the thing that has followed me around all my life, is the data. And I've become fascinated with what it can do, and also where it leads us when it's not quite right. And the challenge that I was set from Rebecca originally was to talk to a group of people who were interested in data, interested in measurement, interested in a lot of things. However, I'd not a great deal of experience with internships work itself. So I started to think about how to empty my brain of the things that I've learned over these 20 years or so about, irrespective of what we do, I suppose, irrespective of the challenge in front of us, there are some techniques, I think, that are really valuable to remember, to learn to hang on to, so so that we can find the right measures and guard against the wrong measures and do the things that are right for people. And I think that the first point that I would make about it all is that in my work and in our work together, at the end of every number and every measurement and every target, there's often a person or a family or an individual who needs this to work and needs this to work well. So while I am fascinated by the data, it's only a vehicle to make things better in our world, things better for people in our world. And I think so, however kind of data minded this gets, if we all just can hold on to that principle at the end of every golden thread of every number, if we remember there's people there and it's important to get it right, then we don't end up chasing down numbers for the sake of numbers and losing the spirit of the work that we want to do. Anyway, here endeth that bit of the lesson. I'm going to start sharing my slides now. Just can somebody give me the thumbs up if you can see the slides?
Yeah, I can see those. I meant to ask Mike, sorry, before we kick off, are you happy to take questions as you go, or do you sort of want to wait for moments in between?
I've got questions scheduled at the end, but
Yeah.
burning questions, bang them in the chat or put your hand up and we will deal with them. Absolutely. I don't want to lose anything. Okay. So we're all friends here. You're all very welcome. So yeah, just stop me at any point that anything doesn't make sense. Okay. Slide number 1. Let's crack on. Okay. So what we're going to cover today, thoughts on measurement and what matters. So we're going to look at some caveats, some dangers of the wrong measurement, some quotes around measurement, some thoughts really to hold in our head, and just start to investigate why we measure. There probably is, on the large number of people on this call, people who are interested in measures for slightly different reasons. It's not one one size fits all with measurement. Some people are here to draw the data up. Some people here are to report on it. Some people are here to manage it. Some people here to improve upon it. But we're all interested in it. So we're going to start to investigate a little bit of why we use measurement in the way that we do. Then I'm going to introduce to one of many sorts of tools, I suppose, to determine what really matters. Some questions. Now, there will be some detail in these areas of the slides, so you will be getting these slides. You don't have to sit down and write down all the questions, but it's examples of how we open up conversations around what we're trying to do, what the key important delivery elements of what we do are, and what the outcomes, what the inputs are, who's helping us, all those assumptions. So we're gonna walk through a version of a logic model, which we call the ELMO, the extended logic model, which gets us a bit of a framework around teasing out our story of change. But then the magic of that is it starts to ask, how will we know about change, and therefore how can we identify those pertinent measures, those measures of value. And then we'll probably have a break around then, and then we're going to talk about a way of measuring, capturing data effectively. So there's again a kind of a framework, whether you have no measures at all in an area, or whether you have some measures in an area that you want to test and refine and improve, then we're going to come up with a little bit of a framework that allows us to ask the right questions around measurement. So the first, I hope that it'll be interesting to everybody on every piece, but I think there's something for everybody in here, whether you've been tasked with going away and getting the data, or whether you've been tasked with telling the story through the data, or whether you've been tasked on driving up improvement. There should be something for everybody today. Okay, part 1. Without further ado, it's all very quiet, isn't it? This, you'll see that the rulers aren't really real. They are the AI generated rulers, but this is one of my favorite phrases. In 20 years or so of measuring stuff, this is really important, and it cuts both ways. This is really key to get this. When we start to put a measure on something, we are saying something about it. We are saying that we find it important and we value it in one reason or another. Now, it also, as I say, it cuts both ways in that when we remove a measurement from something, we're also sending a message. We're sending something to the world. We're saying that thing is no longer important to us. And I think we can all recognize in political as well as organizational life, when measures and targets are quietly dropped, when they're not going someone's way, because we're saying something to the world. If we put a target and we put a number on it, we are valuing it. Now, the what gets measured gets managed was attributed to a guy called, I think it's called Peter Druck, who's it was attributed to him. He's a fantastic leader and measurer and improver of things, a guru, I would think, around management science, really. But I don't think it was. A bit of a Google tells me that it wasn't really him that coined this phrase. It comes from a 1956 paper on the dysfunctional consequences of performance measurement. And it wasn't even in the paper. It was written about the paper, where a chap called Simon Corkin said, actually, what I'm taking from this paper is what gets measured, gets managed, even when it's damaging or not entirely important to do so. Give you some quick examples of that. So, okay, let's take one from Delhi. When the British were there, they had a problem with cobras. Yeah. And so what they decided to do was they decided to give bounties out, obviously the money, not the chocolate bar, for everyone who brought a dead cobra. So the idea was, let's give money away to people who could bring, and we will count the number of cobras, and we will give the dead cobras are our measure, they're our target. And what we'll do to induce really good performances, we'll start to give money away for that thing. And what happened was, clever people started to breed cobras, because what you could do is just breed them, kill them, and make some money about it. And what actually happened in the city at that time was the population of cobras went up. Kind of a good measure, really poor intended consequences. Second one, I think, was on the island of Java. I think was a good example, where they were collecting hominid bones. So they were collecting bone fragments. And they were saying, well, if you bring me a fragment, we will give you, I think it was 10 US cents at the time. And what was happening is, when whole skeletons were found, or whole pieces of hominid bones were found, people were going around the back of the rock and smashing them to pieces. Because if you buy fragments, expect to get fragments. That's the problem. So we end up with measures that don't particularly get us where we want to go. And this is attributed to Einstein. I suppose, frankly, everything is, isn't it? The problem is not so much with measurement in general, it's with blind measurement. It's with the belief that measuring stuff is intrinsically good, and it can lead us to operate really weirdly at an individual, corporate, or society level. Think of other examples, I suppose. The thing that I would say at the very beginning of our chat today, which is people are beyond numbers, and when it comes to people, not everything that goes into being effective can be captured by some kind of metric. We can't capture enthusiasm. We can't capture a willingness to go beyond. We can't capture a lot of those things. And then the work that you do, I think we do have to accept that some of the joy in it, some of the reason that you make these connections, some of the improvements and the quality of life elements are going to be pretty tricky to get to. And the final one, before I stop going on about the theory of it all, really, is to just drop you one quote from a chap called Goodhart, and I think it's called Goodhart's Law, and it's something that I carry around as a useful reminder, which is originally an economist. He said that when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. People will start to chase numbers, and it happens in pretty much everything we do. So measures are one way of seeing how the world works. When we start to apply a target to them and chasing them through as numbers, not in the spirit of them, then we start to get strange behaviors, but also we lose the value of that metric as a measure in its own right. Yeah, well, actually, I don't know if it was him. Again, Albert seems to get a lot of stuff. If we can't think of who it was probably Albert, but I don't know who said that. But I do know that Goodhart said, when a measure becomes target, it ceases to become a good measure. Okay, what we measure. Let me think now. Okay, let's have a think. When we start to think about measures, going to just point that out again. Think about people. Think about that people are at the end of every measure that we're involved in, whether it's families, whether it's staff, whether it's those people at the heart of what we do in internships work. Think consequences. When we design measures, think about how that might affect behaviors, sometimes for the good, sometimes for the not so good. And I think the other kind of the mindfully measured is be at peace with the stuff that you can't measure. There is that phrase that this is Albert's phrase really, that not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. So we do have to accept that there are some things that are beyond our grasp. However, we don't need to measure everything, do we? We just need to get the flavor, we need to get the story, we need to get the important pieces out of our data. Okay, I'm going to flip over to something else now. I'd like you, if you wouldn't mind, if you have a little, if you have an iPhone on you, or an Android phone, or you would like to use a different screen, I would love it if you could join me over on Slido, and we're going to ask of this group here, of all of you, why do you measure things? Why what are we after? What is the purpose of you collecting this data in internships work? Come on, let's see if you could join me there. Oh, I've got 7 of you in, 10 of you in. What I'm going to do, I'm going to share you on this screen. Can you see me?
No. Oh, there you are.
Can you see it?
We can see it, yeah.
Yeah.
Good, excellent, thank you. Ooh, I'm going to let this run for a bit. Show impact, understand change, thank you. To progress. Justification for change of processes. I love that one. These are coming in thick and fast. Actually, I wonder if I can show them in a different way. Listen, what I will do with all of these, there's a couple of Slidos where I'd like your interactive views on stuff. What I will do is all of the content of those Slidos I will put in the back end of my slides when you get them sent out. To hear young people's voices. Business cases, progress or not to progress. Participant, any more for any more? See, it's counting at the top, words that are arriving. Themes, impact, progress, work. Brings us back to our why. That's a really thoughtful and important question, actually. And I think the previous slides I'm trying to get over that if a measure leads you away from your why, you've really got problems, haven't you? But why we do things is all important. We also will be measuring how we do things and what we get out of them, but it allows us to remember that the purpose of our work. Measure, improve, adapt, inform. Excellent. Right, slow down. I'm going to switch back to my slides now. Thank you very much. Listen, as I say, I'm going to. Oh no, we can keep. People will be typing. I might at the break. I might try and draw these together and show you these back in a wee bit. Checking. Have I got the presenter slides on now?
Yes.
Didn't want that, did I? I want the proper slides. I want the proper slides. Why has that happened?
I can just see the slide that says why do we measure with the QR code.
Oh, sorry, I see it. Thank you. Okay, so themes why we measure. To answer questions. It seems like the fairly obvious one, but when the boss or the program manager or a member of the public says, how many of them have you got? Usefully, what we can do is go away and measure it, just count it. Often these things only happen on spreadsheets or 5-bar gates, nothing more needed, a quick question and a quick answer. To show results. So when we're in change mode, when we've set out to achieve something, we measure before and after. So we tend to have, we tend to have baselines. We show where we started and we show where we end, and that in itself is a great story. This also came up in the slider chat, to demonstrate value. Okay, now I suppose it's another step on from showing results, and often people think that when we measure, we are intrinsically showing our value. We have done X and Y, but locked within each of these numbers as well, and all of these, the change for people is also an economic case of value. What we have done is we've invested our money to do one thing rather than another. We've achieved it, and we can do some very simple things around that. We can add that up and find out how much time it took, or how much good it was in the world. So the net benefit, that is the good that we do minus the cost that it costs to do is our kind of return on investment. And anything above £0 and it shows that what we do has paid for itself and more. So we also got this in the chat as well. Yeah, justifying our budget or existence. Now, while this happens a lot, and a lot more than people would expect, this is why we do what we do. This is why we exist, or why our team exists, or why you need us. It's often not the best use of data. I suspect for those strategic leaders or managers or operational, or for anybody on the meeting now would understand that if you're in that position where you're down to just your data to keep your backing, then I think that even when it shows a good thing, you're really on the ropes. This is about how could you have used your data before this to buy in support and partnerships and show your alignment to organizational goals. If you're down to you go away and tell me why you're really good or why we should keep you, then it isn't always the greatest use of data. I mean, absolutely do it, but it should be about doing this all the time. Oh yeah, Zoe, yeah, question, go ahead, please do. Zoe, you there? Are you there, Zoe?
Sorry, I am here, but I didn't put my I obviously did put my hand up, but I didn't mean to. So sorry,
Oh,
apologies.
that's all right. That's fine. It's good. It's nice just to hear somebody else's voice. It's quite lonely out here. Right, keep going. Zoe, get bored, put your hand up again. We can all stop. No, thank you very much. So identified opportunities for improvement. That was in the chat as well. So when we look and we kind of baseline and we examine where we are in the world with any set of measurement data, we can start to ask questions, and these are really important questions. Does that situation, does the mean or the average or that mean age or that income or whatever measurement, is that true for all people in all circumstances? Within our jobs, one very simple thing to do is to then ask about whether that's true for each ward in a local authority or each postcode area. Is that true? Is it the same for women as for men? Is it the same for different ethnic groups? Is it the same for different age groups? This is really important, because behind a number, behind the average, lies an awful lot of complexity and difference. And when we start to ask our questions around those measurements and say, well, that's about average for us, but is it true for everybody? That allows us to find opportunities to make things better for people, make things better for the way our organization works. To manage results, this is probably the most common one. We said that again, popped up nicely in the chat. Why do we do it? Well, we've got goals to achieve, we've got outcomes. Mike, I'll be with you in a second. I'll just get to the end of the slide. That's right. And we tell our story. Measurement helps us tell our story, where we were, where we are, where we're going. That helps us achieve that. And I'm going to talk about those tools in detail in a minute. And it supports the best kind of decision making. When we put our resources into some areas and it gets lots, do we do more of that? Do we do less of that? How do we show that through measurement? Mike, thank you. Put your hand up. Yes, please pop in.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question on this slide because it's kind of an area that I struggle with. So when you've got baseline data, like you were talking about how that then generates questions, and then there's lots of movement, and it tends to then create a requirement externally for more data, and then you move further and further away from your baseline data. So then that baseline data doesn't make any sense. And just through my career, that seems to have happened quite a lot, and then it's very difficult then to kind of measure progress. And that's kind of like almost a kind of feeling of collecting answers before sometimes we know what the questions are.
And I think that's true. You can end up going down a bit of a rabbit hole, can't you, where data begets more data or question. Often I had a boss many years ago that says the best kind of measures provoke more questions than answers. And I did struggle with that for a while, because you're in the business of wanting to answer the question, aren't you? You want to say, well, it is definitively this or it is definitively that. But the truth is, with measures and with data, is even the very best of them, even the very best measure, is only a shadow of reality. It's a false reality. So the data itself will never be 100% true and indicative, but it can be close enough. I do think with the I think we're going to define baseline. I would say what that measure is overall at a certain point in time. I would probably baseline the data, but then when what you're talking about, Mike, is when you start to unpack those and then ask yet more and more questions and end up chasing stuff down. And I do think part of our design, or part of our structure around what data we want, what the purpose of our role is, what we are looking for. So we're not trying to preempt the question. We're preempting our activity and looking for measures around that activity. I don't know if I'm really answering this properly, Mike. I'm just saying I agree with you. It is absolutely something that happens all the time. One element of the organization would say, well, we're agreed on our measures, so that's what we'll do. But we also understand that those measures will provoke questions, and we need the capacity to go and answer those questions as well as possible, but also knowing that we don't have to chase down every element of data all the way to its end, because it's just not practical. It's not practical. In the end, you just say, that's as good a measure as we get. Now we need to get on and do something about it.
Yeah, no, that does help. And it also helps that just to sort of feel it's not just something I struggle with, no. I think. Yeah.
In the old, I mean, say in the old days, he says, in the old days, the kind of the business support role around data, its job was not just to surface those measurements, things that you send off to government, things that that were in the returns, or key performance indicators, or best value improvement measures. Like that, part of that was the job, and it was quite a technical job actually, of going into the database and surfacing that, then doing the calculations and creating the returns. But really good organizations that were the difference between good and those that were outstanding, were those people who questioned and queried that data and reflected it back to staff and asked whether it was true, whether it looked right, whether it was accurate, whether it was what it told us about the quality and value of what we do, and whether there was opportunity to do things different. And I think my part of the reason I suppose that I want to talk to you about this and unpack this really is one of my very personal experiences of this was around what was a failing children's service, and I went in there, and they were, I think it was the old worlds of league tables, which again themselves are a measure, and about 155 English local authorities at the time, and this one was 154th out of 155. And if I told you why, you'd guess who it was. They were second biggest, and the only one that was worse than was the biggest. And the way that they were using their data was to answer questions that were posed by government. The data was being created, and it was all facing up and out of the local authority. Very little of it was facing into the local authority and being asked to ask staff and families and children to engage with it and say, does this look right? Does this feel right? Does this look like the right things that we're doing? And I will show you at the end of this a bit of a technique that we use to unpack that and challenge it to do more than one job. In all of these, this, the purpose of the slide is to say the same data can do all of this. It can do everything you want it to do as long as you communicate it appropriately. And if you surface it, if you shape it correctly, if you sharpen it so that it talks about things you want, and then you share it with people, it becomes a hugely valuable resource. Not the only resource we've got, but a hugely valuable one that drives, that can generate a feeling of celebration about our progress. It can inform people about where we know ourselves things could be better. It can also allow management. It can allow people to say, well, that's where you think I am, and you know, I may need to do better, or the data isn't accurate, so I'll tidy it up. It can do all of these things. The point, what I want to get us into is thinking we need to be smart and thoughtful about those measures. And when we do, when we are smart and thoughtful about those measures, we are able to hit all of these points, and pretty much all the ones in the Slido response. I'm going to go through that because there was loads of valuable stuff, probably stuff that I haven't got on my slide that I'd probably like to respond to. Right, that is the end of the kind of theory bit. Now we're going to talk about, all right then, clever clogs, let's see how we can do it. And this technique, this is one that said don't write loads of notes because you will get the detail of this. But I would like to talk to you about this process. This has been a bit of a backbone of data. Sometimes the measures are there already, aren't they? You turn up at work and they go, well, the way that we objectively look at our work is the number of people who have this within a certain timescale, the number of people who have that, the number of people who've ticked this box, and the dates between X and Y. That's perfectly acceptable, I suppose, but you have to have faith that it was done for the right reasons and about the right things. So we have kind of a 4-step model of making sure that our story of change or improvement or management or behavior maps very, very clearly to the things that we measure about that, and whether there is a connection between doing this faster or quicker and the improvements for people, whether there is a connection between the improvements for people and ultimately cost, value, or change in demographic or system behavior. And it's a really simple 4-step one. What it says is the first thing that we do is we surface what we know or what we think we know. We don't have to be right at this stage. We're collecting evidence and data and knowledge to establish the current situation. This is kind of like baselining, except not just around data, around what we as practitioners, as managers, as measurement and support, as improvement managers, what we all believe to be the situation. Because I don't think there'll be many people on this call who haven't got to the point where they brought data out, spent a lot of time making sense of it, delivered it to a senior management meeting, and people gone, that don't look right. Oh, I tell you what we'll do here. Let's take an action from this meeting and go away and just check if that's right. Nothing ever changes for those organizations. Nothing ever changes if all our questions about our data is whether our data is correct. Our questions have to be much deeper than that, much more important than that. They have to be about the people and the processes that sit behind them. So the first thing I'd say is drag it all out into the sunlight. and say, without being, I suppose, with a bit of humility, saying, this is what the world thinks is happening with us. This is what the world thinks is the case. The second part of that, once you've dragged it all into the light, is to kind of shape it. And what we tend to do, it says here, through in any way you want to do it, but what we've found really effective is through kind of a series of facilitated workshops, talking to people about that data, talking to people about how things want to change, how things need to change, and then breaking it down on the way and saying, what kind of processes do we need? What kind of resources do we need? What kind of interventions do we need? How will those interventions address the core of the problem? Whether they're about behavior, whether they're about opportunity, whether they're about motivation, whether they're about capacity and capability. How does what we do affect what we want to achieve? And then all the way along that line, it starts to say, okay, let's ask the question, how will we know? How will we know when we start to make those changes? How will we know when behavior changes? How will we know when opportunities are in place? How will we know when people are motivated? How will we know when the big ticket item starts to shift from where we are now to where we want to be in the future? So at the end of that blue bit, at the end of the shape bit, you kind of have a lot of information, because the more people you get involved in these conversations, the more people that you have kicking the tires of the data, the more people will tell you some home truths about it, which is, it doesn't matter if you change that, because that doesn't have any bearing on what matters to me as an individual, or me as a family, or us as an organization. So you kind of have to test this, and you have to refine it. And you have to look at those kind of actions, those inputs, those outputs, and get them smart. And I'm not going to put, specific, measurable, achievable, realistic timescale, but start to put some power into those measures and say, I now know that they reflect the reality of people for whom I get up every day and go to work, for whom I support the staff around me to do their jobs. I know now that my measures are as aligned as they possibly can be to the good in the world. And then what we do is we start to share it. We share it widely. We say, this is what we want to do. This is how we're doing. This is how we're getting on. And everybody sees that data. Everybody tells that story. That is the difference. Now, I told you, I started the kind of slide with the idea of this 154th worst performing children's area. Within 9 months, they were top 10. And by the end of the year, they were top. And when the inspectorate came to see it, they received an outstanding rating. There was not one family that could not say, who were interviewed, that could not say they knew where they were in the world, and they knew where everybody wanted to be. And they had a good kind of understanding of how that might change for them. There was not one member of staff that couldn't tell that very same story, which is, here's where we are in the world and here's where we're going to be. But also they had this other layer that says, this is what I do as my part of that puzzle. And here is how I am accountable for it with these kind of measurements. These measurements that have been checked and tested by those closest to the problem. And that kind of sharing and bringing it all into the light gives you another benefit. And I promise you this, it gives you accuracy, because nobody wants to publicly say stuff that isn't correct. And if you show me my workload and measurements around my workload and they're not right on a Monday morning, by Monday evening, they will be right. If I'm helped to make sure that I tick the right boxes and fill in the right places, it will get better. And that means that your measurements and your intelligence and your organizational knowledge about itself is that much better each time. I see a hand. Whose hand have I got? It's Alice.
It's me, Mike.
Hi, Alice. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, thank you. Really useful, this slide in particular. Just kind of really shining that lens on internships work and the work that so many of us are doing at the moment to pull together those Send Employment forums to really bring people from across not just local authorities but other agencies into that vision. So what you've just said I think is useful, because by working through the process you're reinforcing the vision.
Yes.
for a collective group of people who come at it with such different perspectives, understandably. So I think what's helped in internships work has been to sort of unpick with a group of people who are all concerned with the agenda what the ideal pathways to employment for young people with SEND and their families should be, and then to discuss the measures, i.e. what have we got now, and and how do those things contribute to our understanding of people's journeys or their pathway, as we call it, but also being in a place where it's people are not afraid to be, that are not defensive about sharing what's missing, and then being able to see what needs to be developed to understand better the journey. So you're still going back to that core of the person that you mentioned at the beginning. I think for me, that's where so many people, the discussions we're having in the project keep coming back to, you know, the data, and it's something around linking it with that vision work. Sorry, I'm waffling a bit, but
No.
it's exciting. I sort of finding it useful.
Excellent. And do you know what, Alice, if you'd seen my slides before, you could not have given me a better segue into my next slide, because this overview here that we've got here, I'm going to take you into some detail about the kind of questions and the kind of data that plays out in order to do exactly what Alice has said, which is to bring the right people around the assumptions and the vision, and then start to pick it apart a little bit and say, how do I get there? How do I get that measurement without losing my soul to the number? How do I stay on track and stay true to the importance of those people at the heart of it, and, you know, not start gaming stuff, not start, you know, adding things in. And I mean this with the best will in the world. This is, if we aren't true to it and remember that we need to stick to the spirit of it, we may have a whole great set of measures, but the truth is we're not doing our best. We're not doing our best to keep people engaged in the work. We may give people an option, but will it be the best option? And will it be the best option for them and their families in the future? And the truth is, there are some questions and there are some techniques that will help you dig that out. And even, heaven forfend, co-produce some measures and co-produce some activity around those measures. So I'm going to go. Thank you, Alice. That is excellent. Right. I'm worried about how big this is on your screen and whether you'll be able to see all my questions. Hopefully that you will be. This was our. This is something that we use within community-led support now quite often. It is. It's an extended logic. Most people here will probably have seen the logic model before. They're not that. They're not that mystical or magical or even new. What they do basically is say, what are we doing and what do we want, and does it make actual sense? The extended logic model takes a couple of extra thoughts and tries to build them into the process, which is, these are the thoughts. If you want change in your system, if you want a big ticket item, a demographic change, if you want a change for the future, the truth is somebody's behavior has to change. Either people need to do processes differently, or they need to do something within their life differently. And that stuff doesn't happen by magic. We all know in our own lives that there are things that maybe we should do that we don't do. There are people here who probably smoke who maybe want to give up. They know they should give up, but they don't give up because there is something in that behavior that needs support and intervention. There's me. I should go to the gym. I know it's important to go to the gym. I don't often go to the gym. What's missing from that? Is it my capability? Is it my motivation? Is it my opportunity? These are the kind of questions that the logic model starts to ask about and say, what is it that we're trying to do here and how might we know that? So here are, I think, if you won't mind, indulge me a bit, here are some questions that I think are really valuable on this. It's not going to be in a logical order necessarily. When we look at our situation now, measurers on the call, people who are around the data, this could be you. This could be the kind of questions that you might be getting into. Managers, absolutely, anybody that's supporting that change. What is the problem? What is it that we are trying to solve? What is the issue? Here's another good question, dig a bit deeper. What causes that problem? Is there a root cause? Is there something that's sitting behind it that we could be involved in or supporting? The third one, when we're talking about people who will help us solve it, who will help us resource it, who will give us the answers to the big questions later down the line, who is affected by the problem and who cares that this problem is resolved? If you can ask those questions, you will find a target, I suppose, a deeper sense. Think what Mike said earlier about data begetting more data. This kind of feels a little bit like this takes you a little bit down the rabbit warren, because it says there's a problem in X city, or there's an issue with our organization, or the fact is that I'm quite considerably over my target weight. What is the problem? Who is affected by the problem? Can I target my resources at those areas rather than just do something blanket in my approach? And who is it that cares that this problem is resolved? The data starts to emerge then. We've got another one there about, what does research say? That's a really important question as well when we start to model about how we're going to change and how we're going to measure that change. Is that, what do the people in the room, what does the experience of those who live like this, who live with this, who live for this, what's their experience of that, and what does their experience tell us about what works and what does not work? Okay. Now, I'm hoping that's fairly clear, but I'm hoping you start to see we can target populations emerge, causes, root causes, stakeholders, that kind of stuff starts to emerge, and we can start to look at our data around it. What I tend to do, you can do it in any order you so please. What I tend to do is give people a little bit of respite after asking these questions, and start to ask some more positive questions about where do we need to be? What have we committed to? And also for a minute, if you close your eyes, and colleagues at Falkirk, when I did this, it was a really good session, actually, really good session. They were looking for measures and improvement areas around their children and young people's plan. We did this piece of work with them, and I said, for a second, just close your eyes and imagine that those problems that we've got down there and those issues have now been resolved. What does your world look like? What does Falkirk look like today? And they called that bit the balloon arch and unicorn part of the model. It gets you to imagine a future that what we do every day is working, has worked, has value, has achieved that value. And that's really important to kind of lock that into your thinking. What will be the population changes, the system level changes when this is all worked? What will be noticeable within the system? And then here is our question on measures, and it will repeat on every box. And how will we know? Often the same measures that we asked in the first box can be repeated in the last box, because if we have a problem that we can see in the data, then we can probably assume that when we've solved the problem that data will change. So yeah, we get given a few, but we also start to ask questions about some others, which is how people are behaving, how the world looks. Will it be, in terms of employment and education, in terms of quality of life, in terms of well-being, in terms of use of resources? What is going on in our world, not beyond the problem? What will be the indicators of well-being and value? Okay, now I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to work backwards through three. I'm not going to labor these three. But why our extended logic model breaks it down into short, medium, long is this is the bit where you need experts by experience, whether they are staff members, whether they are family, whether they are children and young people, or individuals who are affected by the issues at hand. You need to start to ask about what will make their lives different, what will improve, what knowledge, what awareness, what skills, what opportunities, and certainly within internship was the big one, what needs to be in the ecology of our businesses and of our work and our economy that allows people to take those opportunities. What actions and behaviors and choices are made not just by the individuals and their families, but by commercial entities, by businesses, by local authorities, by everybody that's in the game? What kind of behaviors and choices will be made? What will be different? What will be open to people getting there? And against every one of these, we're going to be asking, and how will we know? So a very simple version of internship works might be, look, there are just not enough internship opportunities for people in our place. And that is a massive disadvantage to some people who need those, who would value those. So when the world changes and they're there, that's fantastic. That's going to be great. So let's just measure the number of young people or the number of adults or the number of people in certain circumstances who are taking advantage of internship work. Great. That's great. It's a great measure, but it's not founded on something that you need to have in place, which is people need to know about it as an option. How does the information, advice, and guidance around it work? Commercial entities need to be on board with it. Why? When are they in the room? What do you know about the barriers and the assumptions, and what do you know about, and how will you know when they change? What are the opportunities that are being made available? Is that something that people do as a last resort, as a second thought, or is it something that's built into the design of how we do things today and into the future? And that's why I think that's more important. It's important to have this aspect in it. And then I would invite you to think about the question, how will you know? And from that, what might you measure in order to tell the story that the composite parts of the problem are being solved, not just the big ticket item at the end? The next questions that we ask are around our kind of activities and inputs. Now, this I think is a joy for co-production, and it's pretty good to start to think about whether what we do truly serves and aligns to what we want to achieve. And so the questions, what works for people? Well, if you're going to ask that question, I would have them in the room with you. The people that we identified at the very first box, who is closest to the problem? Who cares most that this problem is resolved? I know we do, but other people do as well. And have them in the room when we say, what works for you? Are we reaching those people? Are we doing something good, a great thing, but in the wrong place? Are we targeting a different group of people than the ones that we want? This is really important questions. Is it working? And again, the question on measurement, and how will we know? How will we ask them? How will we check? How will we know that we've not gone off target really there? What services will we do? Interventions? What opportunities? Who will do it? How much of it do we need? So these input measurements are key as well, aren't they? That if the size of the job is very, very large, it isn't going to happen with small amounts of intervention. If the size of the task is specific and acute and around a small group of individuals, but it's a lot, well, again, that shapes the size of it. And that is in itself a measurement, because if it's not in place, you just don't stand a chance of getting to your goal. You can't change an entire country or an entire county or an entire city with minimal input around few people. And this is a fairly traditional measure, isn't it? How much do we do and how well do we do it? And how will we know? The measures are baked into that question. The inputs, again, I think it should pop up. Sure, I press the button there. Another good set of measures here, really, which is around what resources, how many staff, do we have the tech, have they got the space, what skills have they been trained up, how do they feel about it? Actually, how do they feel that they've been engaged in the work? Is there an adequate number of everyone to get that? And again, these are things that should be measured. Now, can stop in a second. If we can give you a break in a minute. There's last couple of bits of this model, which I do think need to be. You need to surface your assumptions about what works. And also you need to think about external factors, which are other people who may be rowing with you or rowing against you, the political change, the economic reality of the world, the social barriers, the technological, the legal barriers or supporting infrastructure around you. There's a lot in those assumptions, but there's not. I think that's more of a change management element of the model. I would absolutely think about the top bit of the model now before the break. If you have asked these questions in any order, but I would suggest that there is a way that gets more out of it if you work backwards. You have now created a story of your change. If it's internship works, if it's anything else, it says, here's the situation today. We want it to be different tomorrow. We understand from the people who are involved and closest to this problem that these are the core things that need to start to change if we're ever going to have a hope to get there. And here's how I know, and here's how I test for whether they have changed. Here's what we do. Here's how they're impacted. If you read this model from left to right, you have a story that you can hold in your head, which is underpinned at a lower level by the measures that will tell that story again and again and again every time you surface that data. This is a kind of a mock. I've got loads of great photos of it. The truth of the matter is, when it gets going, it's absolutely covered, properly covered in ideas of indicators that would be good, of ways of asking the question, of just a way of opening up a problem and looking at it in kind of forensic detail with those people who really truthfully and honestly care about it. And if it's done right, it's a very vibrant and very kind of hopeful way of looking at things. And what it gives you is a wealth of measure, wealth of testing the water to check that's right. Two really boring slides before I give you a cup of tea break, okay? Two boring slides, but I think essential if you are looking to devise the very best measures. Part of me would say, if you think about our logic model working back from the big goal, the big ticket green goal, and the outcomes that we need to achieve for people and communities and organizations, and the outputs we need to do to generate those outcomes, and the inputs that we need to do to generate those activities and outputs, we can start to pick the best of those metric ideas. What there are within this log frame template, it's a really simple, you don't have to use the template, but these are the questions I would ask. Where are we going to get the data from? It's great to have a superb indicator, but if the data is not available of quality, of time, then we're going to be spending the next few months of our lives dragging up data that's poor and being told to go away and try again. The proxy power of the data, the importance of it. Is it a good proxy for what we do? Is it a nice to have, or is it kind of essential to have? Because it has value if it can tell us about the importance of our work. And the third element I would say is, does it communicate broadly and widely around what is going on, our success or otherwise? Okay, so data power, proxy power, communication power, that sorts the wheat from the chaff of all of the ideas that you could come up with to measure something. You would say, good, but I would like to, I need to test it against at least these three elements, because then I'll know that it's there, that it makes sense to us as an organization to report it, because it speaks volumes about our work, and it can be communicated widely about our value and our impact on the world. They are the best measures. There's a second bit, obviously, which is, again, these are for those measuring people, our performance managers and improvement managers and our data geeks on the call. I would say, again, there's the part of the monitoring evaluation, you kind of need to get specific at this stage. What is it that you're measuring? Define your kind of counting rules around it. How are we going to get it? What's the current value? Where are we going with this? Where do we want it to be? What are our expectations about it? How will it be measured? How often will it be measured? Who's going to go and measure it? Because sometimes it isn't those people you think it is. You know, if it's a survey set of questions, or if it's being collected from an app, or it's being collected from a case management system, where that data is might fall to a different group of people in order to tell that story, and where and how it will be reported. Okay, I'm going to pause for breath here, because this is an opportunity for you all to get a cup of tea and a comfort break. Now, I've given myself a measure, right? Watch me fail on this. There's 53 people on the call right now, and after you've all switched off your cameras and gone and got a cup of tea and had a comfort break, I'm going to see what percentage of you come back to find out the last piece of this puzzle, because the next bit is about how we pull this together in a way that allows anybody to start to build these measures into that measurement and evaluation framework. So please come back, because if it's less than 10%, that my performance will be very poor. Go and enjoy a cup of tea. Can we be back though by 10 past 11, please? Is everybody back? Has everybody had a cup of tea? And I've popped up on the screen another, thank you very much. I said the thumbs up, good tea. And let's see, I'm doing my own personal measure. We had 56 people before the break. Post tea, I've got 51. That's pretty good. And if I'm one of them, then we've lost for 8%. 8% drop off. But you know, I can see people have to be somewhere else and be out for calls and stuff like that. So excellent. It's one of those things where you have a break in the middle of a presentation and you only get 3 people come back. Then you've got a problem, haven't you? There's clearly nothing of value being said at that time. So welcome back, everybody. If you can join the Slido and start adding stuff to your belief, anything and everything that you think would be, you can have more than one go, but the good measures that support internship. You may have had a chat with Claire over the break. There will be time at the end of this session after the next bit, which is again, it's a little bit detailed around how to play data into the organization once you've established your measures, how you get them accurate, how you end up in a positive feedback loop of getting good data that speaks volumes, that can be shared appropriately with people and keeps telling your story of improvement. There's going to be a point at the end where we're asking people to have any questions or comments. If you have comments or questions for the whole group, you'll have time then to do it. So not questions for me, questions for everybody else. Keep on going. I'm watching these pop up on the web. I hope you can see them. There is. Ooh. Oh, WEX. I'm reading that as work experience. Is that correct? Yeah, this is good. Right, I'm going to start. Please feel free to keep on typing. Again, I'll make sure that this is shared with everybody back. We've got within the kind of the measures that the group are describing now. Obviously, the more that pops up, the bigger it will get. So if you see one you like, if you copy what's been written, it will make it bigger. So there are definite themes, aren't there? There's around long-term employment. I can see phrases like jobs after, offers of paid employment, meaningful employment, long-term employment, community interaction, cost versus impact. There's loads of really good ones here, really good ones. As you're typing it, I want you to think about these are measures that ultimately, a lot of these will be measures that ultimately will describe the project's huge benefit. You know, that's what its intention is to do, to generate long-term meaningful unemployment for people who are poorly served by the current system, and what you do will generate that. I'm also kind of inviting you to think about the extended logic model and say, well, now, okay, how do we get to that magical piece? How does that work? What kind of capacity do we need to create? What kind of opportunity do we create? What kind of motivations on both sides of both for the I'd say employee, employer, the intern and the internship position? How do we create that? Because that is ultimately what will generate your big ticket items. Once you've then considered what those motivations, what those opportunities, what those capacities are, that really directs you back into the next part of that model, which says, okay, then who needs to do what and where for whom? You know, that need, if that's what the barrier is, or that's what the opportunity is, how do we negotiate that barrier, or how do we maximize that opportunity? Again, there'll be measures hidden underneath that, and then ultimately we step back to the resources. This is excellent. Thank you very much indeed for that, Paul. I'm going to leave it open so you can keep adding to it, but I'm going to switch back to say that. Does that. Stop sharing. I don't not like Teams. I just don't like Teams. It's not being good to me. Let's go back to our slide deck. Sorry, I know there's an awful lot of talking. Right, we've got half an hour left. Okay, but we are into the last piece. Now, for this, I have to give what the young people call props. Yeah, thanks and appreciation to colleagues. I haven't seen even if they're on the call actually, but Hannah Strong from Worcester and Mark O'Neill from Telford, who made time available for me over the last couple of months to talk through an approach to capturing and managing data, and then they allowed me to test these things out. This is the first time I've kind of written down this approach. It's my thinking, and it's been tested, and I've used it quite a lot. There may be other ways. It's not definitive. But what I would like to get people into the shape of data, as we've described all the way through, is used for a lot of different things, ultimately to show, the value and progress stuff. But we can use it cleverly. We can use it throughout every level of our organization, speaking to everybody that's involved to communicate the right thing. And by doing so, we generate accuracy and understanding and motivation and opportunity to do better. We honestly do. But if the data only comes out once a quarter or once every 6 months, a month after the end of the quarter, which used to happen quite a lot, isn't it? You get to the end of the quarter, they do their returns, which would take them a month, and then they'd send them off to government, and then you'd see what was sent and written about you or written about your organization 2 months later. It's like trying to drive a car with a rear view mirror all the time. And also, when you see it, you can't do anything about it. If something was an opportunity 2-3 months ago, or in the worst case, 5 months ago, how on earth are you going to use that data to add value and to increase opportunity? So we are not just talking about measurement for the sake of measurement. We're talking about measurement to generate opportunity and action and impact. Okay, so that means we need to think wisely about what we have, who we're telling, when we're telling them, and how we're motivating them to respond. Not using data as a stick to beat people with, but using data as a tool to motivate and to enthuse people about what is going on. And I promise you, the more you use it like that, the benefits start to appear for themselves. It's less about management and about reactive responses, and it's more about proactivity and about the ideas that come from people when they see it in motion, saying, you know, this could be better. This could be better. If we did this, we could stop doing this, which is less of an opportunity. So this is my best guess at how, when it is done well, how to design and to capture and to action that data. So we want to put our internship works head on. You can put any head on for this, but this is how it starts. We've been through a process. We've spoke to a lot of people. We've got a lot of measures that we want to achieve. We've tested them out. We've said this communicates well. This has important proxy power. And actually, the data is currently available. I can start to think about using it. The first thing I would do is, what have you got already? Now, don't start. You could go into a dark room and start digging out everything, but at the moment, let's start about what we have on hand. We will have tested this in the earlier log frame, so we'll probably have found stuff that we're ready to move with that is available to us now. All of those measures that you spoke about, the ones that you put on the Slido, what do we already have about that? Then we start to shape them. Okay, so we won't just have one measure, we'll have a number of measures. We'll have some about inputs, we'll have some about activity, we will have some about how people feel about that activity, and then we'll have our big ticket items at the end, like, you know, improved, increased employability, or, you know, all of these things will be there. So we start to fit them together. In what order do they come? Where will I collect them from? How will I put them together into a narrative? How will I display them back for people in a narrative? Have I got something for everything, or have I got missing gaps? Well, fine if they're missing at the moment. We'll come back to that. But at the moment, have we got data that fits together into a coherent story of the situation as it is, the activity that we're doing to change it, and the change that is occurring? Okay, at this stage, you can start to think about, well, if there are gaps, well, what might be added? What is there anything else that we can do at this stage? Is there anything that has surfaced that could be useful? How can we make the process of both collecting the data originally, the data being input to a place, and then the data being surfaced for our use? How can we make that as easy as possible so that it goes to the right people at the right time? That takes us nicely onto our next bit, which is, right, okay, we've got an idea now, we have a design, we are going to use these bits of data to tell the story of internship works. This is where we're getting it from. This is what it will start to tell us. Right, now, there is our design. Is that good enough? You can go back to the people who were involved in the early part of the work around, and they'll say, yeah, or you've missed something, or there may be further opportunities. At this stage, I would also say from experience, is perfect is the enemy of the very acceptable. You will never get it perfect. The very best measures in the world are only a reflection of reality. They are never reality. So getting those measures that are important, not too many of them that just build around that framework of action and outputs and outcomes, is great. Okay, but you've got a design now at this stage. You know what you're after, you know where it is, you know how it's going to be input, you know how it's going to be surfaced and pulled out of those inputs, and you know that design has been communicated and people have said, right, great, no, okay, we're ready to move on. So now we need to move into the next stage. You need to get on and do it. Okay, so we start to pull that data now. We've communicated where it is. We know we've put into plan which areas of the system they are, what surveys are being used, what questions are being asked, what apps are being used. It doesn't matter, whatever way that you're starting to pull that data or collect that data, it's time now to surface it. And it's very, very small, my screen here. See it properly. Right, sorry. I'm staring at the screen, I can't see it. Okay, we need to convert the data into outputs, so useful measures. So you've got like a list of stuff. We need to get that data shaped into measures that have impact. So we start to say, we may talk to we may start to send some of that data back to staff as caseloads. Here are the number of people on your caseload who currently have a status of in or out of internship, or here is the date of the last review, or here is the next time that here are the open opportunities for people, all that kind of stuff. Go to caseload level. I'm gonna have to bring a copy of this up because I can't even read my own slide here. Apologies. To get a larger version up. Excellent, got it. Okay.
Mike, can I make
Hello?
a suggestion?
Yeah.
Because it is really hard for us to read.
Is it?
And I'm just wondering if you jumped to the very end of this whole piece
Okay.
and then did a snip and put it in the chat, it would possibly be much easier for people to zoom in and look at it more
Can I
carefully.
snip it? How can I snip it? I'll tell you what
Or
I'll do.
maybe
I'll
someone
tell you
else
what
could
I'll
do
do.
that.
Yeah, hang on a second.
Because we're all
I'll-
peering
I'll
at
do
it.
that.
Yeah, I'm
Oh,
sorry, I've realised this now because I'm peering at mine and thinking this is. I did test it, you know, but it seemed to be larger. The last one. I tell you, let me put it in the chat for you. Absolutely right. Yeah. Let me see where we are. Join. Yeah, I am imparting quite a lot of detail here, and I apologise if it's not. Can you see if something arrived? If you click the 3 dots under the slides, you can magnify it for yourself. Thank you very much, Carly. Pop-up button, presentation full screen. Thank you. Well, you've got a copy in there as well. Okay, there's the full version in there. In fact, I'm still doing a bit of a reveal here, but I'll whisk through it because I want to leave enough time for your responses. Let's just go back one. Sorry, I've skipped one. Consider the timings about who needs to see what and when to promote completeness, quality, activity, and oversight. Right now, this is really important. I told you the story of a failing group that became the best, and part of that was that staff had never really seen their own data on their caseloads. They knew what was expected of them, and they were working as hard as they could. But you know what case management systems are like. Sometimes there's a tick in the box that needs to be done, otherwise the whole thing doesn't work, or a date that needs to be in place. So the quality of the work was much, much higher than the metrics and the measurements were letting us know about. But if you skip the process of involving staff in looking at that, then you miss the biggest opportunity to get your data in good shape and to get your data accurate and to get staff engaged in the process. It was a game changer. It was an absolute game changer. I cannot stress this enough. This is when staff can say, without duress, without being told from on high, as improvers, as in measures, as in supporters, we need to have communication with those staff and say, look, there's a place here you can go and find what the world thinks you're doing. And if it's wrong, you come and find me and we'll talk about what needs to be corrected. And it was amazing. So what happened was within 5 very large teams, their performance was everywhere from like in the low 40s to the mid 80s. Inside of 1 month, they were all in the mid 90s. We'd been saying things about what we were doing and what we were achieving that just were not true. And the only people who corrected on that were staff. And it raised issues of whether the training was appropriate, all that kind of stuff. But I tell you what, it really was a game changer. Take the data to the people closest to the problem, and they will advise you whether it's correct. Share. Once you've got it right, as much as that, start to share the quality and coverage of the data. Share the insights that it's giving you. It's working well in these areas, in these postcode areas. It's working particularly well for these age groups. It's working less well for these groups of people here. That allows us to shift and not just focus on the big target, but then to go back and check our logic and say, are we speaking to the right people in the right way to maximize our impact? Well, now we've got it there. We've designed where it's going to be. We've brought it out and we've started to have the insight. We are now really into action and improvement. We're not just testing anymore. We're now we're making decisions on the data. The data should be of quality enough to decide whether or not we're going to act or not. Now, a little aside here again. You'll know when you're looking at data or when you're looking at information by just this really simple test. Do you know whether you need to take action or not? Data will just be there, and you might not necessarily know whether you need to act or not. Information, however, looks sort of the same, but it communicates to you whether action is required or not at its fundamental level. Great data tells you what action you need to take and where, but you know, we'll get to that level of detail later. The first thing is giving people a wall of spreadsheets or a wall of numbers and expecting people to respond is just giving them data. But when you give them in the right shape and the right format that says, yeah, no, that could be better, or that's going brilliantly, you've given them information. That information needs to be played out at all levels. And so I did talk about getting it to staff. The very simple method we do, the world will have moved massively on from this because it was kind of spreadsheet based. But we'd say on a Monday morning, staff will see what the world looks like for them. They will know that their boss doesn't see it till tomorrow. The team manager doesn't see it till Tuesday. So they've got all day Monday to go and check it, tweak it, redo it. The reports are rerun Tuesday. The team manager knows that the group manager doesn't see it till Wednesday. And then the group manager, same thing again, doesn't know that the directorate management team sees it on a Thursday. The point is, by the time it shows up on directorate management team day, we're not talking about the measures anymore. We're talking about what's sitting behind the measures. We're talking about whether we have the right resources, whether we're targeting the right people, when things aren't going right, why they're not going right. We are using data properly and professionally for what it is there for. Good measures translated through good processes gives valuable information. And this is where your worlds will change. This is where your data played out to the right people with the right messages will get you more resources where you need them, will get you management support where you need them, will get you staff training where you need it. That is the value of our measures. We compare that down now. We used to send the caseloads, a lot of data out to the staff, but by the time it arrived on a Thursday afternoon to DMT, there was probably, the directorate management team probably saw a handful, 6 to 12 indicators that, and those indicators would provoke conversation. Again, like Mike said earlier, a good measure often gets you asking more questions than you get answers. But those key metrics are available. At this stage, you can start to think about your activity. Once the data is correct, is your activity driving the right kind of behaviors and data? What other partnerships could support further improvement? Reversing you all the way back to the extended logic model, one of the areas was around kind of people who are close to this problem and who are rowing with you. And also it will identify people who are rowing against you. The example might be a good example where this was true when we got to this stage of the process is that we found that there were other organizations who had different targets, actually, that were absolute loggerheads, were at odds with our targets. So if you're working to improve education or employment, and part of that within youth justice was to reduce reoffending rates and to support young people to stay outside of the criminal justice system. Meanwhile, what we had was a police force, a police service, who was tasked deliberately with upping the number of arrests and crimes. Well, sadly, what that worked out is that the young people in the 10 to 14 year age, they were easy targets. They could drive up numbers very easily. when we started to see the data in the round, that picture became very, very clear. It allowed us to make new partnerships and new agreements with other people who were trying to help us with our issue, and it ended up being resolved. Ultimately, we ended up protecting those young people and supporting their education, training, and employment. Share information widely. Don't keep it in the organization. Share it about, especially when things are going well. You've designed something that speaks to what is important, and now you will have measures that show you what's important. It may show you that things aren't going as well as they could be. Well, still share it because you need help. And things might be going really well, then still share it because you are entitled to celebrate your success. Success breeds success. Sharing breeds partnerships, which then in turns help you get you where you're going. And ultimately, I think we then kind of conclude the piece, which is you just keep going. You just keep repeating this. You keep saying, am I still on track? Am I still doing the things that are important to me? Do I have the measures that allow me to do that? Do I have the data played out at all parts of the organization that allow me to see that that's the case? It's not one measure played out once. Right. I'm hoping that that's clear. Now, I'm going to go back to the very beginning. My brief was to kind of support you with thinking about measures and to give you some tools and advice as to how to manage and to improve accuracy around data. They were the elements of it. I'm hoping that that's it. In a way, I think these tools work agnostic of what it is. You know, it shouldn't matter what you're doing. And when you are all successful in your work with internship work and the project, there will be something else coming down the path. And you need to think about these things again. They're not definitive tools. They are tools that I have seen them firsthand turn organizations round that were really struggling on telling their story, communicating that story throughout their organization, and then having the hard evidence to back it up. And if these tools work for that, there may be other things out there. But at this point, I'm going to open it up to all kinds of questions on this or on other things. And then if we can save the last 15 minutes, I'm going to hand that back to the group to have a conversation on any topic it chooses. Have we got any questions on what's gone thus far? Because I'm kind of at the end of what I wanted to tell you. I'm sorry if the slides were a little bit little at times. You will get them and you will get the content of the Slidos. Any burning questions? Thoughts?
Hey, Mike, I thought the visuals of how to... Oh, my Britney Spears thing isn't down, it's down now. I thought the visuals of how to actually plan going around it was really, really helpful, and I'd like those templates, please. I know you said things are going to be emailed out, but I think just to see it mapped out visually helps bring a big scary process, you know, down into manageable chunks for everyone, really.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously they'll be in the slides. I'd say what I do with these as well is when we do it in practical, I've got like a big A0 ones and get people actively, you know, invite people into to get involved in that workshop. And I can promise you it's a really hopeful thing. You do get loads of great measures out of it, but actually what you get alongside that is a story of change that everybody leaves the room with, from the director right the way down to members of the public, that says this is the world that we live in and we want it to be different, and this is how we're going to go about it. So yeah, it does break it down into those, but it isn't as scary as when I put it up with all the questions on. It's just a blank sheet and you have the questions in you know, on a little pad that you can take people through. Alice.
Thanks, Mike. Really useful presentation. And I suppose I'm listening to you and I'm reflecting on the range of questions and concerns that we get from the colleagues we're working with across the country on the supported internships programme. And we know that in our action plans, we're really requiring people to think about the data and the information. So I love the way that you've really kind of emphasised the importance of it being an ongoing and sort of proactive process, as opposed to a sort of scrabble around, see what you've got and bung it in a box type approach. I'm just reflecting, and I'd be interested to see what other colleagues on the call think, but I'm wondering if the next stage for us at NDTI to support the range of partners that we're working with wouldn't be to almost do a dummy run facilitation of the process that you've taken us through here, but very specifically in relation to internships work, so that it's easy for people to quickly kind of oil the wheels of the work that they would want to be doing in their own local area. Because I think in some cases it is difficult to instigate this level of conversation in a Send Employment forum, and unless you've kind of got that frame. So you've given us a framework, but it's almost like an example, an exemplar. Does that make sense? I'm just wondering if that would be a good next step for us to help people I've spoken to.
So the group needs to, yeah, put your thumbs up if you. Mike's got his hand up, Alice. Excellent. I just kind of point, just to come back on that before I bring Mike in and Claire. It has been really, it's been a valuable approach actually, and I do see that if you do it really well in one place, because you have such a common theme throughout the whole group, it doesn't have to be done 150 times, does it? It has to be done once well, you know, and then what emerges from that can be a table. And I think the other point is that I could have gone away and thought about it in a dark room and then spent 2 hours listing things that I might measure if I were you. That doesn't really help anybody, does it? That it's teaching people to fish, not rather than giving fish. We've got two. I did see Mike's hand up, and then it went down again, and then we've got Claire.
Yeah, mine. I was trying to put a thumb up, and I failed.
That's okay. Thanks, mate. Claire.
Thanks. It's really just to thank you for that, Mike. But I'm just really repeating what I said in the break in case colleagues weren't back, that we had a really good and useful discussion in London in our regional network about data and some of the challenges, and thought that it might be something that we could collaborate on regionally. But I was tasked really with finding out if anyone else is doing anything interesting specifically on supported internships already regionally that we might collaborate with, because as colleagues who know me well will know, I'm obsessed with the problem of duplication of effort across England really, and particularly when it's a relatively short-term initiative like this. And so I'd be very interested, and thank you to those colleagues who've already put their names in the chat for me, but if there's any other work going on already that we might collaborate with, and building on what Alice just said, maybe my view might be that we have yet another meeting, but maybe another national meeting where we talk very specifically about supported internships and data and who's doing what and whether we could collaborate and build on the SIGQUAF as well. That's my two minutes.
Can I jump in on that one? So anyone that missed the LA Innovation event yesterday, that was recorded, and we had Julie from Manchester talking about some of the work they've been doing around data. I'm not going to put Tom on the spot, but Tom from Manchester's here today, and he's been sort of supporting Julie with that. So that might be something we can kind of link up. But I will send out the recording to everyone from all of this week's events. So if you fancy sort of watching the Manchester presentation, you can go and have a look at that. And I know Catherine from Worcestershire, you're on the call, aren't you? Catherine sent a really great template that they've been using. I think, was that with some of the work you've been doing, Mike? Possibly linking over. Yeah, so we'll share that as well.
Thank you. And WLA, the West London Alliance in London, who I don't think there's anyone here from there. They too have done some really good work that London are thinking of piggybacking on, but it's just maybe there's others as well. Thanks.
Neil, see your hand up?
Yeah, that's me. Thanks very much for that presentation. It's really interesting in that model for thinking about data and certainly how that could be used for co-production, the idea of a big A0, and I thought that was fantastic. Suppose I just wanted to, I think there's an opportunity perhaps thinking about all the baseline data that we're all given and updated as part of it. You know, there's maybe there's a set of key performance indicators that become consistent, and we sort of help each other, because the accuracy of those certainly for myself is something of a challenge. Yeah, so how we ensure the accuracy and quality of those over time, and also link into other data sets that we have to use. For example, the Send-To return, and I put a comment in about that some of the ASCOF employment data, which would in theory show longer term impact, has been dropped off. So it's how we monitor those, and maybe have sort of an agreed set of KPIs, and maybe help each other to make sure that we're all finding those accurately, so that we can really tell a story. Obviously each area is unique, and I've found the support from NDTI around the unique nature of each LA really helpful. But I also think there's something about being able to compare and contrast consistent data across this work. Thank you.
Great points, Neil. And do you know, when we think all the way back to the beginning where I said measure what matters, and sometimes when you measure something, you're giving it a certain priority. You're making the statement, aren't you, saying this thing's valuable to me? And where I actually was thinking about those ASCOF measures around employment and education that have been dropped out of the ASCOF suite, because I think that does in a way tell a bit of a story, and not a good one, that something may have just certainly dropped down the priorities of what's important in terms of outcomes for adults. Now, what we do know about the data in adult social care is it's moving to the client. It's moving to a client level. They call it client level data. So these things will be measurable. They will be reproducible, but they won't sit within a hierarchy of ASCOF as it currently is. So it is something you will be able to reproduce. I would go back through the steps I've just talked about, which is the data that you're getting challenged on that isn't accurate. At some point in the world, that was in the hands of those people doing the job. It was the opportunity for them to type it into a system at some point, or to respond to a questionnaire at some point. And I think that level of bringing staff and those people we charge with collecting our data into the conversation around the measures and the story, when they value that and they're supported to do that well, your data gets so accurate so quickly. So that I kind of mentioned that last model, which is play the data out with staff early on in the process, even before you show the bigwigs it. Just ask a member of staff, this is what we think goes on in your caseload. Is that right? And they will tell you about time constraints, they will tell you about training, they will tell you about logins, they will tell you about where they get their information from. All of it will have to be resolved if we want to, if we want to generate manageable and accurate data throughout the system. But Neil, that was a great point. Thank you. Any more? We've got 10 minutes remaining. Rebecca. Oh, hang on, Paula. Paula, thank you.
Yeah, so I think that's been really, really helpful. And I think you're right. I think if you join people together to look at all of that information, it definitely brings them along with you, and you identify much more than you would ever have done if you were just sitting in a room on your own doing it. But from a really practical point of view, obviously there's lots and lots of us that are doing this on top of everything else that we're also doing. So is there any way that NDTI can share what data other local authorities have managed to kind of come up with and where they've sourced that from, just to have a bit of a collective, so we've got a bit of a starting point to start presenting some of those findings? I mean, we've got some information, but I'm sure some are much further sort of down the food chain, and we're all trying to do the same thing is the point, really. So is there any way of sharing what data has already been identified through the action plans that we've got and where that's come from, because some of it will, as you say, not necessarily be really good quality. It's the best they can kind of come up with, and some of it will be really accurate that maybe others haven't thought about.
I managed to speak to a number of people before this over the last couple of, and they shared with me the data that they were collecting, and but the people that I spoke to all had different versions of data. If so, I mean, so it was.
Yeah.
What you're saying, Paula, I think is essential. Exactly what Claire said, effectively, isn't it? Which is surely if we're all on the common journey, then we can do this without too much fanfare, without having to do it 155 different times. We can identify some of those core bits of measurement that will get you on your way. I do think there is still, even after that, I do think that you would add value to it by talking locally with people around those key measurements and saying, how do we make this happen for you in Rotherham, in Leeds, in Putney, wherever you are? Because there will be differences going on. There will be a lot of common factors there, but I think, so the first point is, I don't know how that happens with NDTI. I might have to talk to Rebecca, whether it should all come to the centre and then be dispersed, or whether there's a way of collaborating at this level with a wiki or a Basecamp or a team that people can put in what they currently have. But that would still mean that someone's going to have to curate that, aren't they, and pick because what I was given was quite detailed, and then I kind of worked through it and say, they're measuring this, that, and the other, and then another one that I was given was a really great spreadsheet that showed me what they were measuring as well, but they were very different.
Right. Yeah, so I agree with you, Mike. I think, as you say, it's the start of a conversation, and to bring people along, then we need to include them, not just present them with data. But it definitely gives us a good starting point. I just think in all our action plans, one of the first actions in all of the action plans is around data. So, and we share our action plans with NDTI, don't we? So it's but somebody, as you say, has got to collate that, and it will come from different sources.
Thanks, Paula. That's really helpful. I'd say I think data is quite a hot topic with the programme team at the moment, and we've definitely sort of been having discussions with the Department for Education as well. I think we're definitely aware that also there's so many different things that you use to report data, and they're not always the same. It's not always the same person doing it. So yeah, that's definitely something that's being discussed. So I'll take that up with our programme manager and see how that can sort of be related back to local authorities so that you can be more involved.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Rebecca. And as you say, like a dummy run of looking at that template and working through that would be really, really useful as well. But yeah, that's been great, Mike. Really dead interesting.
Appreciate it. I feel now I should have given them a big list at the end. Why don't you try these for starters? That could be a conclusion. But I'm hoping that, like I say, there's a process that will generate value. And you're right, maybe the start of that process will be about saying what, and that last slide was, what do we already have? What can we already use? Why don't we drag that into the light and get it into that? And that is the first square of that board, which is let's identify it and drag it into the light. And if, like Neil says, it's a bit duff and rubbish around the edges, well, we move on to the next square and we say, how can we improve the quality of it so that it's not wasting anybody's time and it's adding value? So yeah. Great points, Paula. Thank you. Okay, I'm done. Rebecca, back to you.
Hey, that's all right. Well, let's finish 5 minutes early, give everyone a bit of time back. But thank you so much, Mike. That was really good to have you. If anyone else wants to join any of the sessions this week, I'll pop the link in the chat for you. But thank you so much for joining. I'll hang around for the next 5 minutes if anyone wants sort of one-to-one questions. But yeah, otherwise, thank you again. And might see you towards the end of the week as well.
Thank you, everybody.